It's showtime. I'm doing a live. I think the only one alive here is me. I tried, hello out there, whoever might be around. I just decided to do a quick live with no notice, just kind of go for it. So that's what I'm going to do. Greetings to anybody out here, or greetings to anybody who sees us in the future. Hope everybody is well. I probably should put this up, right? Shouldn't I? Oh, yeah, there it is. There it is. I finally figured out what to do. Well, fantastic. I haven't done one for a while, so I forgot how to work this stupid computer thing. Hope everybody's well. Good evening. Good evening, Darren Collins 4411. Are you a real person, by the way, Darren Collins, or are you a bot? Because 4411, that's the information, if you know what I'm saying. Anyway, hope everybody's well. And I figured I'd kind of give an update today because next week there is a hearing on the 18th, and I will certainly attend that in some respect. I spoke about it a while ago because two things. There's another status conference on the 18th in Vegas, and on top of that, there's a motion approving the receiver's compensation, whereby he gets some amount of cash, which I don't care about. That's I have no objection to. But he also gets some large amount of shares, like 5 million shares or something like that. So that's going to be heard on the 18th of this month, this week. I will report on that as soon as I'm able to. It may be I'm going to be out of town, so it might be a little difficult until the end of the week to give you a more precise, but I'll certainly post whatever I find out prior to that. So that be that. Before I start, I almost forgot. Can't do that. When is a door not a door? When it's a jar, of course. Don't you hate when people say "of course" like it's so obvious? Of course. When is a potato not a potato? No, that was a joke. What would bears be without bees? Ears. What's a bear? And I have no idea how these jokes, or these attempted jokes relate to anything that we're talking about. So if you're trying to find some connection, uh, you could rest your brain. What do you call a bear with no teeth? A gummy bear. Where does the electric cord go shopping? At the outlet mall. Of course. I just did the of course part again. And last but not least, well, I was going to do one. I decided not to do this one. Why does Snoop Dogg use an umbrella for drizzle? So I decided not to do that one. But last but not least, what do you call a snobbish criminal going down the stairs? A condescending. How do you like that? So on the 18th, as I mentioned, there's a hearing, GTII in Vegas, and on that, amongst other things, but for our purposes, there's a status conference on the audit, and there is, what am I looking at? Will it ever trade again? I sure hope so. And I can address that before I go any farther. So is it going to trade again? Who knows? I can't say that. I could say, however, to the extent that the receiver has shares that he needs to sell, then that raises in my mind, that raises the likelihood that in some fashion that there will be some activity. My concern that I expressed before is that he'll be able to dump it in the expert market. My concern, that's one of the issues I raised in my opposition. So that's the answer to that question. And thank you for the question. Thank you for the wonderful question. Do you know, by the way, that happens? Somebody asks a question, and the answerer always says, "What a terrific question." I think that's bunk. Most of the questions suck, but that's okay because people, need to know the answers. But I always found it funny when said, "Joe, what a great question. Thank you for asking it." Anyway, so on the 18th, there are two things. One is the compensation hearing for the receiver. I think Candace filed an opposition, partial opposition. Candace is the attorney for some of the shareholders. Then there's a plaintiff's attorney, Callaway, and they represent some other shareholders. Then there's me by myself and I. So in that there's a hearing on the 18th. If you're represented by counsel, you might want to communicate to the counsel on the issues that we're discussing tonight. If you don't agree with my approach, then you could tell them that. If you agree with me, then you tell them that. So I would suggest that if you have counsel that's representing you in this matter, whether it be the Alex Callaway or whether it be Candace or somebody else, communicate so that on the hearing on the Wednesday, the 18th, you can have your views expressed to the court. So that's my suggestion to you all. So I filed something, and I spoke about this in a prior live stream, just to refresh memories, because I'm sure all of you remember all this. But in the prior live stream, I said I'm objecting to the receiver's compensation because basically there's a bunch of other experts who did a bunch of work and they got paid lots of money, and I don't know what you, Mr. Receiver, has really done. And usually you would know because the receiver would be billing directly and he'd get paid based upon the hours and time he spent. This is a different scenario because he decided to take a piece. And we end up looks like a conflicted situation where maybe the interests of the receiver and the interests of the shareholders don't quite align. And so I'm objecting to it. I think it's too much, and I don't know why. I haven't really been told. But the fact that there's other experts that are kind of like running the show, I don't think ultimately that creates a reasonable situation. And that's in Nevada, I believe the standard is reasonableness, that you could enter into a compensation agreement, but it's still got to be reasonable in the end. And the receiver potentially owning 10% of the company is just not reasonable. And the fact that there's no restrictions on his ability to dispose of those shares is also improper. So I raised that. So, and a couple other points, whether the judge cares or not, or reads it or not, or takes it seriously or not, I can't say. I do know that Candace did file like a partial opposition. It wasn't as black and white as mine. It left more room, but that's fine. But it certainly wasn't, it certainly required some additional conditions, etc. And we will see how that goes. So that was already, I've talked about that and whatever. So what I did last night, and excuse me for a second, what I did last night, because what else would you do on a Saturday night in Hollywood? I drafted a brief declaration regarding the audit. And my position is, where's the audit? And we're here 18 months after the receiver was appointed. If you recall, and I don't remember the exact language, so don't kill me if I get it wrong, but it's basically the receiver was going to take immediate action to rectify any problems involving the SEC, et cetera. Implied on that is taking care of the audit. Okay. So, and we've gone through the audit and delay, and we really haven't gotten into this definitive word about the audit. We've had representations from the receiver's counsel, but we haven't heard from any auditor of any sense. And in this case, and you'll see in my brief declaration, because I'm going to read it to you because it's brief. In my brief declaration, you could see that this is not a normal situation. This is a situation where the receiver basically accused prior management of being crooks, or some of them, whatever. It's in his reports. Then the auditor for prior management gets kicked out by the SEC. So you would think at that point in time, well, let me just read the declaration and I'll see if I make a case of it, and you'll kind of, hopefully you'll get the point. So I'm just going to read it because it's pretty short, right? Because I wanted it to be short because I didn't want to overburden the judge, and I wanted him to be able to quickly review it and get my points. So starting with paragraph 2, in part, and this is, I should deserve, I know the Oscars are tonight, this performance might deserve an Oscar, so if you think I should be nominated, please nominate me for an Oscar. In part, the receiver has indicated it's not unusual for an audit to take in excess of 18 months to complete it. They assert it was difficult and there was much information that had to be pulled together. Perhaps, but this could not be the most difficult audit complete of all time. The receiver has suggested in prior reports months ago that the auditor just needed this piece of info or another, and then things would be done. Yet 18 months have passed and still no audit, nor have we heard from any auditor directly. Next paragraph. So we have a company in which the receiver claims that the former management ripped off shareholders. Hence, shareholders have a right to be cautious in light of the receiver's warnings. Then, despite the warning, there are clear suggestions in his reports that if information is provided, the audit could be completed shortly. But that doesn't happen either. Then we find out the auditor selected by prior management, the Borgers firm, was literally shut down by the SEC. This should have put any person following up on the prior management. This should put any person following up on the prior management cautious and doubtful about trusting their decision making. Yet, when prior management selects a new auditor just prior to the receivership, when the receiver gets involved, rather than soliciting a new unconnected auditor, they stayed with management's choice of Fortune CPA. That predictably did not work out, with Fortune refusing to provide certain information or do different tasks. As a result, the receiver had to eventually fire Fortune. Paragraph 5. So the receiver chose the current auditor well over a year ago to complete the audit. However, apparently, they did not investigate the known physical condition of the lead auditor. She was pregnant, and according to the receiver, she had to bow out and could not complete the audit. The receiver reports that many months ago, new auditors replaced the one on maternity leave, but because the one on maternity leave did not fully complete the job, they had to literally start over, and they still have not completed the job as of this date. In summary, paragraph 6. In summary, we have management who engage in shenanigans. We have an auditor shut down by the SEC. We have an obvious error in staying with a new auditor chosen by prior management. We have another error in not finding out the next auditor was not able to complete the audit. We have subsequent auditors redoing their own auditor's work, and no word directly from any auditor clarifying why this job has been so poorly managed. 7. I again request that the receiver provide a representative of the current, and then parentheses, fourth or fifth auditor in the last 2 years, close parentheses, auditor to explain why the project has been so poorly handled. In light of the facts that brought shareholders into the receivership, direct testimony from the auditor would appear prudent and appropriate under the circumstances. And that's my little pitch about the audit. Because again, when I'm thinking about it and just kind of like put it into language, more common, understandable language for myself, just a lot of bad choices as to the auditor. First of all, the last choice by second to last choice by prior management was of a firm that got shut down by the SEC. So if I'm around and I then am trying to engage professionals, there's no way I'm going to stay with anybody that prior management chose. Not a chance. Why would I do that? If I thought prior management was engaged in shenanigans, and in fact, the auditor they chose was so bad that the SEC shut them down, why would I follow any instruction or any decision made by prior management? And what happened in this case was they followed. They kind of said, yeah, I know that we claim that you committed all kinds of shenanigans, and we know you picked an auditor that was so bad that the SEC had to literally shut them down. but we're going to stay with this new auditor that you just chose. And what happened? And obviously, ridiculous decision. And I think I said at the time it was a ridiculous decision. Um, but what did they do? They stayed with it, and they wasted 3 or 4 months. And then until they found out that they could not work with Fortune. And I don't know the true story. I don't know whose fault it was, whatever, but it was obvious that some auditor chosen by prior management wouldn't work. And it didn't take a brain surgeon to know that. And all that did was further maybe delay it more than we think or can understand. Because as it is described, there's a sequence here. So they go to Fortune. They stay with Fortune until the relationship with Fortune completely breaks apart. And Fortune, again, was the subsequent auditor that prior management chose after the SEC shut down their prior auditor and right before the receiver took charge. So the receiver obviously could have gotten a new auditor right away and moved forward. And what's the significance of that? The significance of that is they chose a new auditor, maybe a great firm, but the lead auditor was pregnant. So, and I don't know why the timing was not discussed or why there were errors in the timing, but if the new auditor could not have completed the audit, she shouldn't have started it. And if in fact they hadn't wasted time with that Fortune outfit, that 3 or 4 months, and gone right to the new auditor, even if she was pregnant, they could have completed the audit. So that decision to stay with Fortune when they had already made a decision that prior management was no good makes no sense. And then the fact they go and didn't do their, apparently, I guess, didn't do their due diligence in ascertaining if their chosen auditor could complete the audit. They didn't, obviously, because she couldn't. And then beyond that, shouldn't they have known that if she couldn't, that the subsequent auditors would have to start all over? Because that's what they've said would happen. So I think the report was to the effect is the auditor that went on maternity leave, she did some work, but the new auditors had to go back and they had to redo all that. So because of all these poor choices, we sit here 18 months after September of 2024. I was going to say something naughty. I was going to say something that applied only to males, with our blanks in our hands. That's what we are. And we haven't heard from any auditor. And don't we deserve at least to hear from the current auditors, not to tell us when they're going to be done, because I know the Receivers Council has been all over that don't want to give advance notice to anybody so they could take advantage. We don't need to know when it's going to be done, but we should know under all these circumstances with all the shenanigans that have gone on here, isn't it appropriate that we know and hear directly from the auditors why this thing hasn't been done to this date? I think it's only fair. So if you agree with me on that, and this is on Wednesday, contact your counsel if you have counsel. If you're represented by Alex Callow, and again, if you don't want to, you don't have to. You're not forced. I'm not going to come chase you down and attack you if you don't do it. But if you're into this and you want to have your voice heard, and we have a hearing on Wednesday, and you agree that, and I'm not saying there's any shenanigans, by the way, with regard to the audit. I'm just saying that, clearly we're owed an explanation from these professionals about why it hasn't been completed. And I just explained to you how the decision making, and again, they don't get everything right, but I just explained to you why the decision making about this audit has been way off. And in my opinion, the diligence has been way off. And we still haven't heard from anybody. And since we haven't heard from anybody, and since the receiver claims there were all kinds of shenanigans, it makes sense to hear from somebody from the auditor. Just tell us, listen, this happened and this happened and this happened, and that's why the delay happened. And we're working as fast as I can. Have a good night. Be well. At least something, not regurgitation from the receiver. And anyway, I can't keep on repeating it, but that's really the ball game. We're entitled to more information, and if you agree with me, contact your counsel. Again, if Alex Callaway is your counsel, let them know that you want, what you want. And if Candace, and I forgot the name of her firm, if that's your counsel and you agree that you want her to assert a position, then you do it too. And if you don't, then don't. But I think we're entitled to it. So because I at least wanted to have it in the file, I've filed, two declarations with regard to this particular hearing, one about the audit and one about the compensation. That's all we can do. We can just use our voices. So anyway, so pay attention Wednesday after the hearing. Hopefully we'll get some information on that and the decisions of the court. I don't know if the court will make it right away. It may make the decision right away, or I don't know if the court will take it under submission, but we shall see. Anyway, hope you are all well. I am not AI, by the way. This is really me. This is really me. And again, thank you for attending. I hope you have a very nice and restful night. Be well. I'll keep you apprised of what happens on Wednesday, and talk to you soon. And good night. And that's it, really.